It's good to be back. College lacrosse is underway. Welcome to the first podcast of Shot Clock. I'm Brian Shapiro, happy to be joined with Andrew Morris, Mo, the Mo Man, Mo Mania. Mo, how's it going?
Not bad. Glad lacrosse is back.
Dude, absolutely. Games kicking off this Saturday, February 4th. Let's do a little recap, though. Looking back at the NCAA championship game, Maryland and North Carolina. Mo, North Carolina coming off with the overtime win. What is your biggest takeaway from that game coming into this season?
Maryland last year was the prohibitive favorite. Everyone thought that it was their year. They've been right there every year for the past, 7 years or so?
Absolutely.
Seems like it's been a while. But UNC, it was their year. But I know we're going to get into it a little later. But I don't have UNC having a good year, but not as good as last year. I have them fourth. And like I said, I know we'll get into that a little later.
Right, fourth in your preseason poll. I mean, they had a good second half of the season. Remember, they were 12-6. This was not a championship, team. Nobody thought they were going to make it to the NCAAs, let alone the finals. So if you look at their performance along the way, it's not great. And I think that really kind of translates into the preseason polls. I mean, the Maverick Lacrosse poll put them at first. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's the biggest elephant in the room, I think, out there.
They have a lot of returning guys, a lot of veterans. But like I said, they didn't for the first half of the year last year, they couldn't figure it out. It's going to be tough again. They lost a couple of key guys, though.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. You got Pontrello, Kelly, Simpson, to name a few that are gone, but you still got Pafani, Stephen Kelly, and Luke Goldstock. Those are both weapons. Not to mention Michael Tafagari. However you want to say his name. Tagliaferri, who's an absolute savage. And Coach Bresci, he's a player's coach. You see it on the sideline.
Oh, absolutely.
The backwards cap, you can't beat that. Everyone wants to play for him.
We were there. We were loving every second of it. Great weekend in Philly. Can't wait for Foxborough this year.
Absolutely, and just thinking about how Maryland's been there so many times. We talked about that just a second ago. And props to Coach John Tillman, but when it comes down to it, you got to win. And you lose 2 years in a row, first to Denver, now to North Carolina. You got to be hungry. So what do you really think? Is this team ready to win it this time?
I don't know. Losing new goalie this year. They have all the returning attackmen back, which is don't get me wrong, it's huge. But goalie's always a question. It's a new guy. He's an athletic goalie, Dan Morris, but we'll see if he's ready for the big stage.
Yeah, absolutely. You just mentioned the returning attackmen. Matt Rambo, Colin Heacock, just to name two of them. They're savages. On the field. I think Maryland was 17-3 last year. That's like a college football style team that just wins a ton of games. But I think I agree with you. I think they're right up there. Definitely in the preseason poll. Mo. Just looking at your preseason poll. What are your outliers? What teams do you think deserve the rank they get? Others maybe not so much.
Well, we just talked about Maryland. I think Maryland's the number one team. I think they just have their talents there, 100%. Another team Denver. They have Cannizzaro and Tyler Pace. It's hard to beat those guys. But Denver's always had defense and goalie questions, but I have them at number 2. A shock to a lot of people might be Duke at 19.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah, they're in the top 20 just because they're Duke. They're young, though. They have 4 great freshmen coming in. They're freshmen, though. They're going to make mistakes. I think this Duke team has the potential to be a second-round NCAA team or the potential to be not even make it. Another team I'm very interested in, I have Virginia higher at 16. Love Lars Tiffany going down to Virginia. Me and you saw him a lot. Brown.
Absolute great coach.
I just think he's going to bring that team to fast-paced offensive juggernaut that lot of teams, as we saw with Brown, can't keep up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. Just starting off, you look at Denver, you're right. I mean, Connor Carazaro, absolute savage. Tuarton, watch list. I think he had, 69 points last season?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't compare to Dylan Malloy on Brown, who had 118 points, 62 goals. But,
Yeah, something like that.
But you're right. Denver is such a well-built team, even considering Zach Miller's, he's leaving for personal reasons, but...
Which is a huge loss.
Even Bill Tierney said that, Zach Miller is a key asset and losing him is going to hurt, but he understands. And, it is what it is. You have to adapt. I'm going to be curious who kind of fills his shoes because Zach Miller, I think, is one of those players where he's so good, but he's stealth. People don't see him. People don't understand how he plays. He's always on the outside. He's always feeding. He's one of those great players. He's kind of like a little bit like a Lyle Thompson in terms of distribution when it comes down.
Not
to
as explosive, but distribution-wise, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. And then, I think you make a very good point with Brown and Duke. Well, firstly, Duke. They had a tough season last year. Inconsistency all over it. And, if you think about it, how are they going to transition from the inconsistency, and turn around and bring results? Their record was 11-8 last year. They got knocked out in the first round of the NCAA. If you look at the past couple years with Duke, that's unheard of. Them not making it past the first round is stunning.
They're going to have to win games this year off face-offs and goaltending. That's just what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to win the face-offs, which their face-off guy is very capable of. And they're just going to have to control the ball, and then when they're on defense, got to make saves.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a building year for Duke. So I think, you put them at 19, that's pretty accurate because Miles Jones, gone. Deemer Class, gone. Right there. You're already on your back, your back heel. So you got work to do. But switching gears, talking about Virginia, exactly what you said. Lars Tiffany going down to Virginia, that juggernaut offense is unheard of. And I think that's a very good way to kind of reboot a dying program.
They were. The only thing is, does he have the athleticism to make it work his first year? I think that's a huge question. He built that program up at Brown. Larkin Kemp at long pole midi, jumping up in the play all the time. Dylan Malloy, Kyle Blastry, just to name a few. I don't know if he quite has the talent and the athleticism at Virginia yet, so they might be a little high in my poll, but they're definitely a team that will be fun to watch this year.
Absolutely. I mean, that's when you think of the big schools for lacrosse. You obviously have your Duke, you have your UNC, your Johns Hopkins, but Virginia, that's like the gold standard. So I'm very interested to see what Lars Tiffany can do. Not even this season, but next season, seasons to come. Because like you said, it takes a while to build a program, and
Absolutely.
And to build that offensive, fast-paced team, it takes time. And speaking of that, turn to Brown. Mike Daly coming up from Tufts University. He's the architect of juggernaut-style offense, and now you have Dylan Malloy at the helm. I mean, I can see this team putting up 20 points a game.
I've seen a lot of Tufts games, so don't get me wrong. Love Mike Daly as a coach. That team recruited so well for D3. I don't know if he can recruit that well for D1. He'll have some sort of game plan, and I'll be wrong. And Brown will win the Ivy again. But I don't know. I think it's going to be tough in his first year, jumping up from D3 to D1 right away.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mo. If you think
but
about
I have
it.
them at 17 in my top 20.
Right, and I think I agree with that. Because if you look at their schedule this season, it's I'm not going to say it's a joke, but
they don't have any big games.
They have no big games. They have no ACC matchups.
Right.
And just Rutgers out of the Big Ten. So it's kind of like last year. Their schedule was not that difficult, but man, did they put a beat down on every single team, which gave them that kind of generous, ranking.
But I think it showed that they had one loss in the regular season, and it showed when the selection committee came out with their rankings, and they were the 5th team. They had one loss. They were the best team, best record in the country, and then they were ranked 5th.
Right.
It shows that you got to play a tougher schedule. No matter how big you're winning these games by, what league you play in, you got to play someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they fell to Bryant back in, I think it was April. in
Late
overtime.
April,
What
right?
a crazy game. We were actually there for that, Mo.
Yes, sir.
But that's a very good point. How it's not, you could go undefeated, but if you're playing terrible teams, it's not going to mean much. You got to play those tough opponents.
Right.
Which I think you would also agree with me on this one. These programs, they gain strength, they gain experience playing these big teams, playing the
Absolutely.
top 5, top 10 teams. So you can be the best in your conference, but if you don't have the experience in non-conference games, you're going to fall short in the NCAA tournament. So looking ahead here, players to watch on the season, in the next couple games, Mo, give me maybe 1, 2 guys that you think can really explode this season.
Ben Reeves of Yale is a guy that I think is unreal. I just love his game. He's going to put up points this year. I actually have Yale winning the Ivy League this year, not Brown. I think he's going to be a huge part of that. You named Matt Rambo before. You named Dylan Malloy, Cannizzaro. Cannizzaro is my favorite to win the Tewaaraton, but a guy that I also really like is Pat Spencer from Loyola. We saw him at championship weekend, and he was quiet at first, and then he came on late, and he had a great tournament through their whole run. They were a surprise team. They beat Duke to start it off.
Absolutely.
So,
Pat Spencer, filthy. He was a freshman, too, last year. Carried his team to the quarterfinals, unfortunately. I'm sorry, semifinals.
Semifinals, yep.
And unfortunately, they lost quite badly in the second half, at least, to UNC. But, yes, definitely a player to watch. I'd say easy Tewaaraton watch list there for him. And, just talking about Ben Reeves. He's a junior this year. He was a finalist for the Tewaaraton last year. Absolute savage, the way I look at it. And this is a guy who's kind of humble. He was actually interviewed by Paul Carcaterra a couple of weeks ago, and he just said, "You know what? I never thought I was going to be here. I'm just living in the moment. I'm working my ass off, and I'm trying to make the best of it." So that's kind of the mindset you want out of a guy who's got so much potential to really explode on the field. And now coming up to week 1 here, we're just going to take a quick look at some of the games coming up. So, the first NCAA game was played this past Thursday. Vermont beat Furman 13-12. I mean, that's not much of a game there, though. But looking ahead to Saturday, a couple standouts here. Providence versus Boston University. Mo, what are you thinking about that game?
I think that's going to be actually a really, really good game. BU is a team that we're both from Bryant, so BU is the big game for Bryant this year, as well as Providence. But I think both teams are on the rise. Providence is the Big East. They play Villanova, they play Denver, they play Georgetown. They're tough. They usually don't get killed. They'll make every game a pretty decent game. And BU was a surprise to a lot of people last year. I just think that's going to be a good test for both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Both teams actually receiving early, poll rankings. I think Providence was up to 17, Boston University 19-20. Within the first couple of weeks, they can put up numbers. And, Boston's such a new program. It's in its, I think, second official year as Division I. So the potential to perform is unparalleled. Because if you look at Richmond Lacrosse, a couple of years ago, their club, all of a sudden they go D1, and they're a top 20 program. They beat Duke last year on, I think, a Tuesday night. So these young teams have so much talent. It's unheard of. So you have to watch out for them. They're huge threats, I think, this season especially.
Well, it just speaks to how the recruiting is just very diverse. That anyone can pick up anyone. It's not like in basketball, the big recruits go to Kansas, Duke. In lacrosse, a lot of recruits go to Syracuse and Virginia, and what we've talked about before. There are also a lot of kids that can play that just may have slipped under the radar a little bit that go to these smaller teams like a Bryant, Providence, Hartford that just can play. They can play and they do some damage.
All right, Mo, switching pages here. Duke, Air Force, obviously we talked about it before. Duke really looking for a little redemption last year, getting on the right foot to start the season.
Yeah, we talked about Duke a little bit. They be interested to see how these freshmen come out of the gate. Air Force was a team that surprised a lot of people last year, winning the Southern Conference automatic qualifier. I think they're going to do it again, but we'll touch on that probably later on this year a little bit. But yeah, Duke, I don't know what to expect, to be honest with you. I expect Duke to win it, but I think Air Force is going to give them a game. I wouldn't be surprised if Air Force wins.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very good game. I think that's Sunday, 3:30. Yeah, that's going to be a very good game. You know, Mo, we got to address the elephant in the room here. Notre Dame, probably one of the most popular teams in all of college lacrosse. You know, you think about Sergio Perkovic, the Motor City hitman, who, to be honest with you, last season didn't really deliver as much as he did back in 2015, and most notably in the semifinal game against Denver. I mean, what are your primary thoughts on, you know, him and maybe Notre Dame as a whole?
I don't know. To be honest with you, he's a great player. Not my favorite, though. I'll tell you why. He really just kind of, his dodging is okay, and then he just stands out there and just rips, which is a great shot, but a lot of it was dominated by Kavanaugh finding him up top. At least that's how I saw it. Without Kavanaugh's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. I think, go ahead.
Perkovic, I don't know if Perkovic can do it by himself. I mean, they probably have great recruits, great. I don't know. I think Notre Dame could be a title contender, but I also think Notre Dame could be a one-and-done team. It's just, we're going to have to see how it plays out. They lost Matt Landis, too. That's a huge loss at defense.
Absolutely. The guy was a filthy D. Pullman. But I think, it's a very good point. Perkovic is great from the outside if he can create opportunity. And without that feed coming from Cannizzaro, I mean, he might, it might be hard for him to kind of deliver.
Right.
Yeah, Mo, kind of transitioning now to Johns Hopkins. A terrible 8-7 season. Granted, they made it to the first round of the NCAA. They still lost to Brown, but come on, how can they make it that far for having a subpar record?
In terms of making the tournament last year, they got the Johns Hopkins treatment. To be honest with you, the committee saw the Johns Hopkins name, said Brown, Johns Hopkins, that's going to be a great game. Have to put them in. They played tough teams. You can argue that. They played Maryland.
Yeah, I think that's two good points. I mean, and I think they're going to be a team to watch this year. I mean, Joel Tinney and Connor Reed aren't really healthy. They're going to be healthy this season. It's something to look forward to. And they have that great freshman, Forey Smith. Definitely a guy to watch out to. Definitely starting probably Tuesday night against Navy. But it's kind of, I'm not going to say sad, but you're right. They did play a hard schedule. But should they have really gone, and gotten that bid into the NCAA tournament over another team?
No, they shouldn't have been picked. To be honest, I know this is going to sound homerism. We both, root for Bryant. I thought Bryant should have been in ahead of Johns Hopkins. I thought Ohio State had a case. Harvard had a case. Villanova had a case. These teams, sometimes it would just be nice that if the committee didn't always pick the ACC, Johns Hopkins. Like Duke probably was a question mark last year. They were good at the end of the year, so that's why they got in. But back to Johns Hopkins, they got a special treatment. You know what? When you're a big school, you have all the history. Sometimes you get it. Not much you can do there.
Absolutely. And, Mo, just kind of transitioning here. Predictions here. Who is your team of the year going to be in terms of the biggest surprise, in all of Division I college lacrosse? What team do you think is really going to stand out the most?
To be honest with you, I have two. First, Villanova. Offensively, they are fantastic. They were second behind Brown last year in goals per game. I think they were at 13.52. Brown is at like 13.9 or something like that. Like we've talked about this a lot. Defense is a question mark for Villanova too. Defense and goalie. They can put up goals, but in their 5 losses last year, they gave up 13.8. not great.
Yeah.
I think that if they can shore up the defense a little bit, they're going to be a top 10 team. They're going to be battling Denver for the Big East title. My second team to watch is Syracuse. For some reason, I know you're not a big Syracuse guy. Syracuse, for me, ranked at 7. They have a lot of returning guys. They have Ben Williams back. They're
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Nick Mariano to start, too, as well.
Something about them, Shaps, I'm going to be honest with you. I just like them. I think that they're going to come back to the Syracuse ways.
It comes down to face-off. We talked about this. We talked about this with Kevin Massa, Bryant, Ben Williams, 62% from the face-off X. And you even have Evan Malloy, 54% last season between the pipes. This is a team that is surprisingly good on both ends, but just for some reason couldn't finish the job last year.
Well, that game against Brown, against Maryland at Brown in the quarterfinals, they couldn't finish. They had a very hard time finishing. They played decent defense. I mean, it's against Maryland. Maryland's going to put up points no matter who they play. But they just, for some reason, their offense was just shaky. It was a lot of ISO. They finally figured something out in the middle of the third quarter, I think it was, and they got it a little bit closer, but then Maryland ran away with it again. But they're not going to win games if they can't finish. But I think give those guys an extra year of, in the program, so on. They're going to figure it out this year, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a team to watch for sure. As you said, I'm not a huge Syracuse fan, but when you can smell talent, it's definitely going to be coming from that team. I definitely agree with that one, and also Villanova. I mean, just going back to that, they are impressive. 9-5 last season. The average 13.5 goals a game.
Right.
That's second behind Brown. Think about that. Second highest goal scoring team in the country. They are a top 20 team without a doubt, and they are a team to watch.
I have them at 13. I have them right behind Towson, right ahead of Richmond, who I can make another case for being a surprise team.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But at Villanova, I put a big star next to that for sure. I mean, they have tough games, though. You think about that. Non-conference, they're going against Yale, Penn State, Brown, Bucknell, Maryland.
They are.
That's a tough schedule, but we talked about that before.
Tough, but
that builds skill. It builds that mindset.
Just heightens your RPI, too, for the selection committee.
Exactly. You knock off two of those teams right off the bat, you're looking pretty good. So it's gonna be a good season. I think we're both really looking forward to it. Cannot wait for game day come Saturday, February 4th. Mo, any final thoughts?
I'm just gonna end it with a big Bryant shout out. Both Bryant guys, like I said, need a big year. Need an NEC championship. We dropped it last year. A
lot of wheeze, Mo. A lot of wheeze.
They blew it last year. Last year was definitely their year. They were very talented. They just fell short against Hobart. Hobart ended up going to the NEC tournament, but they fell short.
Yeah.
So let's see. They don't have a big game this year. Their biggest game is BU, which I touched upon earlier. So we'll see how it goes. Big game tomorrow against Manhattan, in Manhattan. Start off the season right against a crap team.
Yeah, go Bulldogs. I think Bryant's got a chance. Coach Pressler, he knows what he's doing in the 11th season for the Bulldogs. We'll end it at that. Thanks for listening to The Shot Clock. I'm Brian Shapiro, joined by Andrew Morris. See you next week. Take care.